I love reharmonization. There's just something so fun about taking chords in a song and changing them to some unrecognizable monstrosity while keeping the melody exactly the same. A question I hear often though is what's the point of reharmonization? Or when am I ever going to have to reharmonize something? Or how much reharm is too much or too little? I was planning on doing a video about just this concept alone, but coincidentally Splatoon 3's Grand Fest recently concluded, which reminded me of some tracks in the Splatoon franchise I've been meaning to talk about. So I figured I could just combine the two topics to talk about a bunch of different ways to reharm a tune in the context of Splatoon music. Splatoon has a problem, you see. They just can't stop remixing and reharmonizing its own music, often making such banger arrangements that when I listen to the original, I only hear the missing harmony from the more recent reharms. But then again, I also have a problem. I just can't stop listening to these damn sea creatures, and it's really starting to bother the people around me. So I can think of 3 broad categories of reharmonizations across the Splatoon games. Let's take a look at one song for each category and 2 reharms of each song, so 9 songs total. Splatoon is a very unique series in the sense that literally every single piece of music heard in-game is attributed to named in-game musicians. Obviously, real-life musicians are the ones actually behind these tunes, but what it means is that there's a level of consistency and explanation for compositional choices within a track, due to the stylistic inclinations of the in-game band or group that wrote it. And we'll see this exact thing in the first tune we're going to look at. Now or Never is a track that plays in the final minute of the turf war matches, signifying that the game is almost over. During Splatfests, a cover by the game's main idols plays instead, which gives us 3 different versions, one for each of the Splatoon games. This tune evolves across the games, being remixed into each of the idol group's eclectic styles of music. And this doesn't only affect the instrumentation and general arrangement, but the harmony as well. But before I get too ahead of myself, let's take a listen to the version from Splatoon 1 by the Squid sisters. Mostly a pretty straightforward kind of electronic pop tune. The melody is pretty fascinating with these splashes of bright Lydian flavor from these sharp 4 scale degrees every so often. For much of this verse though, it's otherwise a pretty static melody, hanging on that G for most of it. Even in the chorus, the vocal melody holds on C for the majority of it, but with that C Lydian-ish scale underneath as a counter melody. And the melody kind of just does the same stuff in the following sections. What I think is kind of interesting is that the harmony underneath all of this is actually very minimal. So minimal, in fact, it's hard to even notate this as chord symbols on a lead sheet, because most of the time there's only 1 or 2 notes heard at any given moment, technically not enough for us to be able to give a chord symbol. In the intro, for instance, the bass just doubles this melody line and that's it. There's literally no other notes. And in the verse following, with this mostly static melody on G, the bass technically outlines the notes of C7 with C, E, B flat, and G. But it's a very loose outline, especially considering that it breaks this outline by going to F in the following line. And then these A's and G's in the melody are just doubled by the bass with no other notes, giving us another point of unison. The chorus gives us some notes with a falling synth line, and vocal harmonies that barely outline the chords notated here. I think this part is probably the most harmonically complex element of the tune, with all of these moving parts, especially the Lydian-ish counter melody with the bass moving in the opposite direction for some wonderful contrary motion. But other than that, the harmony overall in this tune is very simple, and it makes a lot of sense. It preserves almost the exact same level of harmonic complexity from the original rock arrangement of the tune, which still works really well in the Squid sisters' more minimal pop style. The lack of harmony for the majority of the tune means that the energy and complexity comes more from the drums, bass, and other synths in the arrangement. But it also has the unintended side effect of giving a lot of space for other arrangements to reharmonize, such as the following arrangement in Splatoon 2 by Off the Hook. This one is pretty dang fun, and for the most part a proper reharm in that it doesn't really change the melody apart from slight rhythmic alterations. The first immediate difference in harmony is this intro section where we have this contrary motion between the falling bass and rising melody, much like the chorus of the previous arrangement. The Lydian melody over the semi-chromatic bass immediately lends such a frantic sound to this tune that plays when there's only 1 minute left on the clock. There's this cute little sampled horn fanfare which then goes right into the verse. This time around we have a lot more harmonic information. Among other synths playing sparse lines in the background, there's one clearly playing chords underneath, giving us this diatonic 1, 3 minor, 4, 5 kind of progression. It's an interesting departure from the C7 chord outline in the previous version, but otherwise pretty standard stuff. The following phrase is interesting in that it actually doubles our harmonic rhythm, meaning we now have 2 chords per bar instead of just 1. And we can see that this section just doubles the speed of our chord progression from the first phrase, which adds this neat subtle increase in intensity. Let's take a listen to the chorus. In the previous version of the chorus, we started on our 1 chord, C major, but here we actually start on the 4, F major, which sets up this nice chord progression of 4, 5, 6, and flat 7, with each chord just stepping up. That B flat chord is kind of fun. It's our non-diatonic flat 7, which has an interesting but unobtrusive color in this mostly diatonic chord progression. The following phrase starts the same, but instead of going to the G, it actually goes to our 5 of 6 over G sharp, which just has such a dramatic pull that takes us into that A minor as it did previously. That A minor mostly holds while the bass steps down chromatically, which gives us this F sharp minor 7 flat 5, which steps up into the suspended G7, which is our 5, that then wants to take us right back into the start of our verse. Really, the last thing to note is these 2 measures during the final verse at the end of the tune. It's the exact same chords as our verse earlier, but the bassist goes off the deep end and plays A, B, C sharp, and E before going back to the usual roots. And I think it shows just how much power the bass note has in hearing a chord. Because now with C major over A, I hear this first chord as kind of an A minor 7, then just an inversion of E minor 7, then this C sharp augmented-ish, then E minor 7 again. These unexpected chords, especially that C sharp, act as another subtle, chaotic push as the round reaches its final few seconds. The increased harmonic complexity in this version makes sense, as Off the Hook, in addition to their more electronic pop kind of sound, leans a bit more hip-hop R&B-ish compared to the Squid sisters. Also, Marina, who writes and produces much of the duo's music, is canonically a dork who misses social cues and talks about music theory in entirely unrelated conversations, much to the chagrin of everyone present.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, do you think I'll ever find someone who will love me despite all my faults?
Hey, do you think this 2504 sounds good? Oh, but anyways, it's kind of an interesting case for reharmonization, where canonically, a character who writes the in-game music likes more complex harmony. Therefore, the real-life composer has to increase the harmonic complexity as well. Which brings us to the most recent arrangement of Now or Never, this time from Splatoon 3's Deep Cut. The deep cut arrangement has a gradual ramp up in harmonic complexity, and features some things that show the group's more modern J-pop-ish sensibilities. Harmonically, the tune actually starts the same as the Squid Sisters version. The bass matches the notes of the intro, and then the verse is mostly the C7 stuff again with this fun bluesy bass line. At the end of the verse, though, we have this D minor to E minor, which then goes to these hybridized F major 7 over G and E minor 7 over A. find this really interesting because the F over G approximates a G7 sus4, which would then bring us back to the C in the verse, which makes sense. But to put this E minor 7 over A afterwards is kinda weird. It's still diatonic, so it's not so unexpected that it functions as this super tensiony dissonant chord, but it has a relatively weak movement back to C. And even still, this same sequence of F over G and E over A is used throughout the tune in multiple places, which I find so fascinating. We'll see some of those examples in a second, but before that, after the second loop of the verse, we go into the chorus. It starts pretty much the same as the off the hook version, walking up from F to G to A to B flat. But then the second phrase, though it starts mostly the same with the F major 7 to E7 to A minor 7, rather than just moving the bass down chromatically like off the hook, actually moves the entire A minor 7 chord down in constant structure. I always laugh when I hear this. I hear this exact chord progression in like K-pop and future bass kind of stuff. The constant structure minor 7 chords that just move down by half steps sound so out, because most of those chords are non-diatonic or out of the key. In this instance, it serves to set up that C7 at the end of the line, which wants to take us back to F for actually one more phrase of the chorus. This time we get the more diatonic E minor 7, and then the bass walks up from this D minor until we get the familiar F over G to E minor over A movement we saw earlier. And like the rest of the tunes, this takes us into one final verse before the end. But this time, they reharmonize that final verse, going for an even bluesier kind of sound with this C, E flat, F, G kind of chord progression, which in the second half just steps down diatonically from F. But these last two chords are both non-diatonic and step up chromatically to approach our C major on the start of the next line. It's just so appropriately wacky. And then that final phrase does mostly the same thing, giving us one final obligatory F over G to E minor over A, and then another hybrid chord, F major 7 over B flat. And then the tune ends with the familiar Lydian-ish outro. Just like the Squid sisters and Off the Hook, there's an in-universe reason for further reharmonization in this arrangement. Deep cut represents the idea of chaos, and it's apparent in their musical style, which blends the Splatoon idol sound with traditional Japanese music from Shiver, Indian/Middle Eastern music from Fry, and Brazilian music from Big Man. Like Marina, Big Man is the producer/composer of his group. Not only could these wacky chords represent his Brazilian influence or the idea of chaos, but he's also a dork. He's gone band for band with Marina in multiple interviews and canonically has a deep understanding of music theory. It's similarly funny because what this means is that the higher-ups probably told the composer to lock in and write silly modern jazz harmony for some of these Big Man tunes. And I suppose Toshiyuki Sudo understood the assignment, because this and some other tunes we're going to look at in a second demonstrate Big Man's understanding of how to use reharm to change the overall feel of a tune. Which is a great segue into our second category of reharm, changing the harmony to evoke a different setting. Deep Cut's arguably signature song, Anarchy Rainbow, plays during Splatfests. But during seasonal events, the tune is arranged and reharmonized to better fit the vibe, which we'll see later. But first, let's take a listen to a bit of the original. Another wonderful example of Deep Cut's super eclectic, chaotic, and loose approximations of Brazilian, Japanese, Indian/Middle Eastern mishmash. The melody during Shiver's part is mostly a variation of the traditional Japanese yo scale, which corresponds to minor pentatonic in the West. Fry's part, meanwhile, seems to be in Macham Rast, which is actually microtonal and mirrored by the instrumental. harmony is pretty straightforward and mostly consistent, with this minimal and mostly implied 1 minor flat 3-4 chord progression, a pretty standard Dorian progression. And the chorus is similarly pretty simple, with this 4 minor, 5 minor, 1 minor. Really, the only thing of note is that it changes our F sharp major from earlier to F sharp minor, giving this chorus a more solid natural minor sound versus Dorian. Overall, it's a really simple and singable banger. This repeating melody in the chorus over this Brazilian carnival-style instrumental works so well for these Splatfests, which are in-game festivals. But as mentioned previously, sometimes these Splatfests have seasonal variations, such as Splatoween, which is the in-universe equivalent of Halloween. And the Splatoween version features a spookier arrangement, with theremins, harpsichord, and a darker harmony. Let's take a listen. Our harmonic rhythm increased, whereas in the original we have this alternating 1 chord per bar and then 2 chords per bar. Here we just have 2 chords per bar the entire time, this looping 1 minor, flat 3 major, 2 minor, and flat 2 major.
The jack-o'-lantern.
I really like this increase in harmonic rhythm. Changing the harmonic rhythm of a tune is, in my opinion, an under-discussed aspect of reharm. With more harmonic movement, there's more energy here and this verse section feels more dramatic. And of course the harmony helps that as well, kind of Hall of the Mountain King-ish with this descending chromatic flavor. The really powerful chord in this chord progression has gotta be that D major, the flat 2, which is attributed to Phrygian, generally considered to be one of our darker modes. The chorus is also so fun. Like in the original, we get this subtle harmonic shift. Check it out. So the chorus is pretty much exactly the same as the original, but they just changed every single one of those Bs in both the melody and harmony to B sharp, changing our scale from C sharp natural minor to the more dramatic sounding C sharp harmonic minor. Listen to both back to back. It's kind of cheating for a reharm to change the melody as well, but whatever, I'm not the reharm police. I still find it kind of fascinating how changing one note in the scale really just shifts the vibe to a completely different place. This harmonic minor is a super cliché Halloween kind of sound and works really well for this campy but spooky atmosphere. But what if we go in the complete opposite direction? Splatoon's winter holiday, FrostyFest, features this more Christmassy arrangement of Anarchy Rainbow. We take a harmonic rhythm in the other direction, now slowing it down to 1 chord per 2 bars. And we can really see how it makes the tune sound more chill. The chords help this as well, with this simple 2 minor 7 to 1 major 7 vamp. The lazier, smaller movement between these two diatonic chords just feels like a promenade in the snow, especially since we're now in just E major, the relative major of C sharp minor, which has all of the same notes. I also really like this C sharp 7 at the end of the second line, which is our 5 of 2, wanting to pull us back to the F sharp at the start of the chord progression. It just feels super Christmassy to me. They stripped away Fry's microtonality in this section for the purpose of not clashing with this new chord progression. I suppose that makes it technically not a pure reharm, but it had to be done to make it more wintry, I suppose. And as the pattern goes, the chorus changes things up with some new chords. absolutely adore this chorus. Our harmonic rhythm increases and now we have mostly 2 chords per bar, really increasing the energy. And our chord progression is 4-5-3-6, the lovely and ubiquitous Royal Road progression. This chord progression, especially with this rising chromatic figure at the end of the line, is just so dang cute. It sounds like the Christmas episode of an Idol anime, which is actually kind of the exact setting. Overall, all of these arrangements are great examples of using reharm to evoke a setting. I always find it kind of interesting that for each time period or location, there's almost always this harmonic zeitgeist you can draw upon. It's hard to pin down what exactly defines a Christmassy harmony or why exactly it sounds like Christmas. Unless you're Vox, in which case it's 2 minor 7 flat 5. Okay, but jokes aside, there's really only examples of things that sound like a setting, and as a composer or arranger, you can take those vague ideas and mash them up to create that setting's essence. And I think that's cool just because of how human it is. Or I guess in Big Man's case, Manta-in. But anyways, thus far we've seen reharm used to show differences between different characters' musical styles, and reharm used to show differences in setting. But definitely, another huge category, and one that's especially big in film, is reharm used for drama, to highlight characters' differences in personalities, feelings, and the subtext in changing situations. This is used to great effect in Splatoon 2's story mode, but before we listen to that, we need to hear the de facto themes of each of the Squid sisters, Callie and Marie. Let's listen to Callie's theme first, Bomb Rush Blush. This cute little pop tune has similar instrumentation to the Squid Sisters' Now or Never cover. The harmony is similarly very simple, so much so that it's also hard to really even call some of these chords. Both the progression and melody are simple, pretty static, and entirely diatonic, kind of hovering around this B minor type stuff. Let's listen to the pre-chorus and chorus. We have more movement in the melody and the harmony builds, starting on this G and moving around our other diatonic chords. The chorus features this catchy melody over a pretty standard 4-5-1-6 minor chord progression, now sounding more D major than our previous B minor. It's really simple, but this theme works so well for Callie. This almost sickly sweet pop sound just fits her cheerful and optimistic personality perfectly. You can almost reverse engineer her bubbly disposition through just the song alone. Marie's theme contrasts this. Let's take a listen. We have this more laid-back halftime feel. It's minor, like the verse of Bomb Rush Blush, but the chords are more fleshed out. It's also hard to give chord symbols to these verse chords, but rather than a lack of information, it's because they're voiced a bit more ambiguously. But the chorus gives us much stronger and unambiguous harmony. Let's take a listen. Unlike Bomb Rush Blush, not only do we stay in minor, but actually reinforce that kind of sound, with this spicier E7 flat 9 that wants to just pull us into the following A minor. This C9 as well is also slightly non-diatonic, serving to pull us back into the F at the start of the next line, which acceptably goes to just D minor instead. After this line though, we get the slightly darker and colder B flat major 7, which is under our otherwise diatonic melody, which walks down to the A minor, then a short sequence of chords before the loop. This theme also fits Marie. As the quieter and more reserved of the two, this lower energy theme with more complex harmony works wonderfully. That B flat major especially I feel is so important for her theme. It just feels like such a nod to her introspection and more cerebral nature. Okay, so now we've heard both of their themes. Let's take a look at the reharms. Spoilers for the ending of Splatoon 2's story mode, but if you've watched this much of the video, I figure you either don't care or you're as deep in the Splatoon lore rabbit hole as I am. Alright, but anyways, at the end of Splatoon 2, you the player and Marie find Callie has been brainwashed by the main antagonist, and you need to fight him to free her. A few splats and bomb rushes later, Marie attempts to reach Callie by singing Tide Goes Out, and after a second, Callie joins in with Bomb Rush Blush at the same time. I just love this kind of thing so much. Polyphony, especially when it's two voices singing their melody over each other, is just so cool. I'll probably do a video on that at some point, but here there's just so much drama, and we can almost peer into their feelings through the harmony. The chord progression for these first two lines is pretty much the exact same as Bomb Rush Blush, except at the end we get this 2-5 that mirrors what happens at the end of the first line of Tide Goes Out. Not to get too English teachery about it, but it almost sounds like even though Marie is singing her own song, she's not thinking of herself. The harmony is almost entirely Callie. She's adopted her cousin's harmony into her own song, showing her selflessness in this impromptu duet. The F sharp 7 over A sharp is also so fun. The bass has this nice movement where it walks up in this line from G to A sharp to B. This F sharp 7 could definitely be explained as borrowed from Marie's chorus, but honestly it's just a great reharm for this higher stakes, more dramatic situation. This 5 of 6 yearns to resolve to the following B minor. We interestingly start this last line on the G sharp minor 7 flat 5. It's really intriguing. It acts as a reharm of our more expected and stable 4 G major, so it's a bit uncomfortable. But it also has this slight tinge of hopefulness, since it wants to step up to the A, which it does, which then wants to resolve to our major tonic, D major. But we actually don't get that catharsis, because after this A, we get this series of progressively darker major chords, almost showing that DJ Octavio is still in control of our friend. And all of this drama is further accentuated by non-harmonic arrangement decisions, like those haunting bass notes from the bowed double bass, and distorted sampled strings as the only source of instrumental harmony. Music within a piece of media, for the most part, can't literally tell a story like visual elements can. But it has the advantage of being able to show the subtext, and I think the harmony is arguably the most important part of that. Experiencing both the on-screen struggles of Agent 3 and the Squid sisters versus DJ Octavio, combined with the music underneath mirroring their motivations, is just pure cinema. Alright, so for our last tune of the video, I kind of lied. Our last example is another reharm that mashes up both of the Squid sisters' signature songs, but it doesn't quite have the same thematic poignancy. In fact, it's almost its own category of reharm, reharmonizing something just because it sounds cool as hell. Let's take a listen to Blushing Tide, which was recently released during last month's Grand Festival. This remix is pretty fun. It splits up the Squid sisters' parts more horizontally versus having them playing over each other. This first part is Tide Goes Out, mostly following the original's harmony. In fact, actually simplifying it a bit, other than this chromatic walkdown we've seen in a few other tunes. The Bomb Rush Blush part of the intro is pretty cool though. It gives us these new chords we haven't seen in the previous versions. The C major 7 is our flat 7, and this plus the following two chords are actually quite similar to what happens in Tide Goes Out. It's kind of a cool inversion of what we see in Tidal Rush. Whereas there, Marie adopted Callie's harmony, here Marie's harmony plays over Bomb Rush Blush. But we gotta talk about this next part. We have the E minor and then the following G major 7 over A, acting as our cool hybridized 5 which wants to resolve to the 1, D major. But instead, we get this offbeat, syncopated cycle of non-diatonic major 7 chords moving in perfect fifths. This always makes me laugh. It's definitely very, very gratuitous, and kinda somewhere between future bass and modern J-pop. Definitely not like anything we've heard thus far from the Squid sisters. But these cycling major chords are similar to the octavio chords at the end of Tidal Rush. It's almost like they reclaimed that harmony for themselves. It sets up that G major 7 over A again, prolonging the suspense, before resolving to the minor tonic B minor at the start of the verse. The verse, funny enough, is really simple and actually a similar chord progression and minimal harmony to the verses from both Bomb Rush Blush and Tide Goes Out. It trades between the two melodies once more, before going into a heavily reharmed Bomb Rush Blush pre-chorus. We start on that flat 7 major 7 again, C major, and then mosey our way through some diatonic chords before this fun 2-5 that wants to take us to G. But then this line we start getting some weirder chords. Start of the line we have C sharp minor 7 to C major 7. That C sharp minor 7 is so bright. I hear it as a borrowed chord from Lydian, possibly lending to its brighter sound. The following two chords parallel this movement, with A flat minor 7 down to G major 7. Then we get C sharp minor 7 again, and this wacky D sharp minor 7 that's even brighter, before falling to this D7 which we saw earlier. Like earlier, it's really neat seeing Callie's otherwise simple chord progression turned into these funny chords. I like how the chords themselves aren't complex vertically, they don't have a bunch of random notes and tensions over them. It's instead complex by relativity to our key center. After this, Callie and Marie sing the end of the latter's pre-chorus. The chords are mostly diatonic, except for this cool F major 7 sharp 11, our flat 3 major 7. Then after two diatonic chords, we're into the chorus. The chorus mostly adheres to the chord progression we saw in the beginning with slight variation. One thing I find neat is the rhythm of those harmonic stabs. It's just so syncopated and offbeat. For almost the entirety of the chorus, we never have a chord land on the start of the measure. It's always offset forward by a beat or backwards by half a beat. It really just pushes the tune forward and keeps you on your toes. After Marie's half of the chorus, we switch over to Callie, keeping mostly the same harmony. At the end though, we get this one figure very similar to the end of the intro, with another syncopated 5th down major 7 sequence. The producer just really can't help herself, and honestly I respect it. What's funny is that it's definitely a wacky reharm that doesn't have much in-universe significance other than just sounding cool, but they still gave it an in-game explanation. The Squid sisters got a new producer for their songs in Splatoon 3, known in-game as Yumi, but in real life is Yumi Takahashi, who also produced Tomorrow's Nostalgia Today and even Liquid Sunshine, which in-universe was actually produced by Big Man rather than Yumi. But it's cool to see this because all three of these songs have very similar harmonic choices, and in the case of Liquid Sunshine, almost creates an interesting meta-narrative, as if Big Man, Ian BGM as he's credited, tried to emulate Yumi's style since he was producing for the Squid sisters. Overall, just a really unique setting, and it's always so cool to be able to draw connections between these songs and see what the characters have to say about them. So this is the longest script I've ever written, and I'm probably hating my life right now in both the recording stage, yes that's true, and editing stage. And yet this doesn't even scratch the surface of both the why and how to reharmonize, but hopefully these three larger categories capture some of the coolest contexts. I also have so many other Splatoon tunes, or Splatoons I suppose, I want to talk about. Let me know which songs across the franchise are your guys' favorites. There are definitely more Splatoon videos on the way. Here's to Third Kit's, Splatoon 4, and maybe even some spin-offs. Seriously Nintendo, give us Splatoon Crossing and my life is yours.
It just feels like no matter how much effort I put in, nothing ever seems to work out.
You know, being single isn't all that bad.
Hey, do you think Big Man and KK Slider would be friends?
Metal